In yesterday's video, we ended with Galmaraz in the hands of Sigmar. In addition, Alarielle was found, but things are not looking good for our heroes. Today's video is going to cover the campaign book Balance of Power, which ties very nicely with the Black Library books Hammers of Sigmar and Wardens of the Everqueen. Like in the previous book, there are multiple battlefields happening, and I'm going to make them into linear stories, and we'll just tackle one to the next and then summarize everything that's happened. So we're going to jump right into the War for Life, Part 3. And it immediately picks up where our last story ended. We're in Athelweird, it was invaded, the Stormcast were able to locate Alarielle, but a huge Nurgle force followed him there. In a sense, Gardas was able to lead the enemy straight to the prize they always sought. In a brilliant defense, the Stormcast form a perimeter around here, and they just barrel straight through the Khorne forces in a direct line and make their escape. Very barely, but make an escape. And this leads to a colossal chase. This is a cat and mouse game of epic proportions. Nurgle's waited 500 years to have Alarielle in his clutches, so it's every Nurgle force in the realms pointed at her, trying to catch her. And the Stormcast Eternals are looking for any place of respite, any place that is safe, or any passageway that can take them to safety. But these forces are hustling, and remember that Alarielle and all her forces know the realm better than anyone else. They're able to kind of outpace their chasers, except for one warband. And this is the Nurgle warband led by a very specific and fan-favorite warlord known as Torglug. And he really becomes the main villain of this story, because he used to be a defender of Ghyran, but when Nurgle came, they twisted him from the inside out, subduing him and binding him to the will of Nurgle. So, in essence, he knows this realm just as well as Alarielle. He was a defender of it, knew the lands like the back of his hand, and because of that gives him an edge over all the Nurgle forces that aren't native to the land. He's able to keep up with them. He is on their tails the entire time. And all these things set him up to be the perfect villain to chase them. Now, realistically, most of this book, and Wardens of the Everqueen, is this epic long chase. They're just fleeing to get Alarielle somewhere safe, really so that Sigmar can extract them, rebuild the Pantheon, and start the war effort anew. However, Alarielle is in a very bad way. She's depressed, she's despondent, she's coming out of Athelweird and seeing what the realm has turned into, and it's just destroying her from the inside out. And one thing that the book goes out of its way to really explain and kind of hammer into us is that Alarielle is just like the realm of life itself, by meaning they just work in cycles. There's birth, life, death, rebirth, etc. While the magnitude of the forces and the corruption in Ghyran has depressed her, made her so despondent that it forces her into that kind of death cycle of her life. Because of that, she falters, she grows weak, she loses her voice, she gets physically smaller. She starts reacting to the realm around her. She seems more tied to her realm than any of the other gods are. After several of these little minor battles where Torglug's forces are harassing them and harrying them across their journey, she collapses and really just honestly shrinks on the ground there as she goes into the fetal position and turns into something that we know now as a soul pod. Again, she is the realm of life, and the realm of life is her. Just as the Sylvaneth are her kind of chosen children / offspring, and they have seed pods that just kind of contain their essence and who they are, and they can be planted in different places, the same thing happens to Alarielle. She has her own perpetual cycle of birth, life, death, rebirth. So now this soul pod, which is roughly the size of a fist from what the book describes, has just become the most important artifact in Ghyran. And at this point, Lady of Vines, who is the leader of the Sylvaneth forces with them, comes up with a plan. She says, okay, we gotta plant her someplace where there's no corruption. Nothing here is going to taint her. If we let chaos in, as she's kind of, like seeds do, like they take in the area around them and are kind of products of their environment, she will do the same. So we'll break her if we put her in a place that's tainted by Nurgle. So we have to find some place where not only is there no chaos effects, but also some place where the right elements are absorbed by the seed, and it gives birth to Alarielle in a way that will make her the goddess we need her to be right now. In a sense, kind of dictating what her personality and traits are going to be like. How do we need her to be right now? And so the Lady of Vines thinks of a place called the Black Stone Summit. And this is a place where, when Chaos first entered, dozens of factions from Ghyran put aside their petty differences, united as a one front, and fought and repelled Chaos for a long, long time. It's a place of heroism, cooperation, but most of all, a place of vengeance. They put everything aside and got the mission done of defeating Chaos. And they say that's where we're going to plant her. When I plant her there, she's going to absorb that heroism, that cooperation, that zeal for vengeance, and when she's reborn, she will embody those things. Now, if you haven't watched my video on Alarielle, you should really go check it out. I'll leave it in the show notes down below. This really does raise a lot of interesting questions that we talked about in that video about having a part to play in forming your own god, which is just a cool narrative thing that could only happen in AOS, and I just love it. To the Stormcast Eternal, this is a ridiculous moral quandary it puts them in because they have no way to ever do that to Sigmar, but the Sylvaneth can do it with their god. So it's just a very fascinating thing, but that is the plan. Get the soul pod of Alarielle to Blackstone Summit, which is a long ways away. And it takes them days to do this travel, and this travel is full of peril. Torglug is on them every step of the way, guessing their every move, trying to figure out. He has a really good sense of where they're headed, knowing all these same things about Alarielle. A little side note pops in here, which I found awesome in the book, is that Khorne looks down and sees what's happening with Nurgle chasing Alarielle and says, I want to screw with my brother. And so he basically hurls Skarbaran and a big Khorne army down, and he's going to intercept our heroes who are taking Alarielle. So there's a huge Khorne force waiting for them, and then the Seraphon pop up. Remember, we talked about Seraphon last week. They kind of see this whole thing as a game. Well, they saw this coming and sent their own army, and so they have this like Slann who sees what's going on, comes in, absolutely decimates the Khorne army. So none of that happens, and then gets out of there ASAP. So there's just this kind of scene where all of our heroes, the Stormcast, Sylvaneth, and the Soul Pod, roll up to this battlefield, and they just see a bunch of dead stuff and war and craters and fire, and they're like, what the heck happened here? Never mind, we don't have time to think about it. They just keep running. So it's this little side plot. It's really cool. I think it was mainly in there to give us a chance to see Seraphon in action, but it just wound up being this really cool scenario where you have so many forces here that aren't even related to one another. Like, Khorne never actually engaged our heroes, but this whole game is happening simultaneously, and the players don't even know what's going on. I found that very fascinating. And cool stuff happens on this journey. It's not just running and taking breaks and then running some more and taking breaks. They engage the environment. For example, there is a beast that is basically a living ice mountain that the Lady of Vines summons to freeze a river for them so they can go across it. And then, of course, it collapses as the Chaos guys try to cross it as well. You know, a lot of engaging, trying to seeing what Ghyran is really like and how the realm itself is rebelling against this kind of infection that is Nurgle. So I really do recommend these books if you want a sense of Ghyran. If you have modeled your army to be from there, these books are really fantastic for that. And after this perilous journey that takes several days, they make it to Blackstone Summit, and somehow Torglug is there waiting for them. He figured out where they were headed, found a faster route. Between having Chaos allies to make him travel faster and knowing the realm better than the Stormcast Eternals, he was able to finally make it there. And at this point, a massive fight ensues. And it is one of the coolest fights in this story. I know I say that quite a bit, but really these books are great at taking a bunch of little battles and just to kind of keep you interested, and then having one like exclamation point level big fight that is just beyond cool. And things are just bad for the good guys. You got a handful of defenders versus a huge Nurgle warband. And as Torglug is hacking and slashing his way to the Lady of Vines, who's carrying Alarielle's soul pod, strikes her down, cuts off her arms. Now the soul pod is kind of rolling around with a severed hand attached to it, crushes Lady of Vines, and is about to like lift up his little axe and deliver the killing blow as he gives him a speech about how life is dead, basically. A colossal meteor comes in and changes everything. People go blind, several Nurgle warband people are decimated, and a new champion enters the fray. His name is the celestant-prime. This is a Stormcast Eternal we don't really know much about. I'm sure I'll do a video on him at some point, but he wields Galmaraz, which lends so much significance to the previous campaign to retrieve the hammer. Now that hammer has become the ultimate weapon of war for the Stormcast. And given into the hands of a worthy fighter, Galmaraz is an absolute wrecking ball. celestant-prime will shoot over to one side of the battlefield, decimate a strong pocket of resistance, dart over to the other side. He has wings, he can travel extremely fast, and he's just zip-zapping across the battlefield, smashing anytime enough Nurgle forces gather together to mount a real assault against the defenders. He's there, crushing them, calling down meteors, things like that. But as I said, Torglug did the damage. He cut the arm off of Lady of Vines, soul pods rolling around the battlefield. He does end up ending the life of the Lady of Vines, and as he walks to go get the soul pod to claim the prize that Nurgle has sought for so long, the celestant-prime turns his gaze to him and hits him with Galmaraz straight in the gut with so much force that it literally rips his body and soul apart. Like, his body goes backwards and his soul goes in a totally different direction. This kind of green miasma blows out the side of him. And what everyone stops to notice is that this green corruption of soul separates off to the side, and then a huge bolt of lightning comes down and it fires off into the sky. And in this book, this is where this scene ends. Our heroes have made it to the point. Their enemies have been defeated. As far as we know, none of the people following Torglug knew where he was going, so the only Nurgle presence that was stopping them is now defeated. Alarielle made it to her destination, but at huge costs. And so the Stormcast plant her in the ground because that was the order they were given from the Lady of Vines before she was defeated, and they're just waiting. And here's the thing, that really is the main story of Balance of Power. There are now 3 smaller stories which we're going to talk about because they all kind of add to the war effort, show you the scale of this combat, but that really was the main thing. Alarielle made it to her destination and she's ready to be what we would know as reforged, but reborn really in a new and exciting way. But going into these little more sub-stories, we're going to travel over to the realm of fire, Aqshy. And here's the most important thing. We just spent days in Ghyran being chased. We don't see a whole lot of the war effort moving forward for the good guys. We just see this kind of small ragtag group of heroes running away a lot. We often forget that there's a huge war going on. There are Stormcast Eternal chambers all across all the mortal realms fighting for realm gates. And Aqshy's no different. There is a huge war going on, and more than the Stormcast Eternals are fighting. At this point, we actually move away from Stormcast entirely, and we focus on the Vostarg Lodge of Fyreslayers. And they are under assault from Skaven. Skaven have been tunneling and burrowing into their lodge for some time, and if you don't know much about the Fyreslayers, we actually recently concluded a week devoted to talking about their lore, which I'll go ahead and throw a link to in the bottom here. But they have been able to survive the Age of Chaos and now up until the Age of Sigmar by kind of living in secluded, rough-to-reach areas for their lodges, but Skaven are so great at digging they were able to locate the Vostarg Lodge. Bael Grimnir is the Rune Father, the patriarch of this entire society, and he just found out that the Skaven are in his home, and also that his son is missing, likely dead. And a big fight ensues between the Fyreslayers and Skaven. Right at the end of this fight, the Stormcast Eternals show up. This is a subset of the Hammers of Sigmar, and they offer a bargain. They want access to the Bloodstone Keep. The Fyreslayers just saw the Skaven get destroyed, so we know these people are obviously not enemies. But of course, they're not necessarily on the same boat as far as, we're all just good guys, let's go fight some chaos together, so they want payment. These guys are mercenary-minded. Again, referring you back to the Fyreslayer week we did, talking about Urgold and its importance, the Fyreslayers demand payment. The Stormcast are able to provide enough gold, which the Fyreslayers deem as worthy, and they make an accord. What do they want to do? Well, they want to go to a place called Bloodstone Keep. This is a huge Khorne fortress built into the side of a mountain. And the question is immediately raised, why would you want to go there? No one survives there. Huge armies have gone across that fortress and never returned. Well, as we'll learn, there's something very special inside the fortress that the Stormcast want. They don't want to take the thing, they don't want to own it. They just want to get in, get what they want, and get out. And they hire the Fyreslayers to bring them a more discreet route rather than the front door, which they agreed to. Got paid enough gold. The Vostarg Lodge takes them down some secret corridors. They get ambushed on the way, but that's fine. They are able to fight them off and make their way through a hidden pass in the mountains into the Bloodstone Keep. At this point, the Stormcast pulls out more gold and says, I'm going to pay you. You're going to help us retrieve what we want, at which point he spills the beans about what they're after. There exists a very special artifact called the Brass Chain, which was made actually by Khorne for the purposes of binding and controlling his most insane demon, Skarbrand. A bloodthirster that knows no friend from foe and just kills, murders, slaughters everything with an immense amount of power. We did a video on him, and I'll put that in the show notes down below. What they want to do is steal the chain that binds him while they suspect Skarbrand is out of the base. This way, when they do encounter him in the battlefield, they can bind him and tie him down. This way, one of Khorne's most epic weapons on the battlefield will be taken out of the game completely. To put it simply, Skarbrand is so out of his mind that he can't distinguish friend and foe. He doesn't know when to chill. So when he's not actively on a battlefield, Khorne chains him down with this just to kind of keep him ready for action. So now we have the goal in mind, and the Fyreslayers agree. They take an oath. They say, yep, we're going to help you get that chain. This seems like a good idea. Keep Skarbrand out of wars. And the Fyreslayers lead them deep into the keep. They're able to get this far past most defenses by a little crack in the mountain range that allows them to get basically right onto the fortress floor without having to go through the big gates in the front. Now the mission is to just smash and grab. Smash the defenses, grab the chain, and get out. But as soon as they enter in, the whole place goes mad. You got demons, you have Khorne bloodbound, you have even just their normal beasts of burden, like just corrupted animals who are there, as like I said, beasts of burden, just go ballistic and are all unleashed on the heroes. And the Stormcast are doing okay. They're making their way towards where they believe the chain is, doing fairly well with the Fireslayer allies. And then something they didn't expect happens, and that is that Skarbrand is actually there at the base. They assumed, for whatever reason, that he was gone, that he would be out fighting some other battle that Khorne had for them. In fact, he was actually at that fight with the Seraphon and things like that, but he was destroyed there and hurled back here, so they didn't seize the moment quite as well as they thought they would. Now, if you are a Blades of Khorne player, this whole section is just so for you. Skarbrand cleaves a Lord Relictor in two just with ease. He kills as many friends as enemy, and he kills a lot of both. This guy just goes ballistic. He's got an axe in his hand, and he's just swirling around, screaming, full of fury. And they can't really mount a defense. Kind of like I said earlier with the celestant-prime, bouncing around the battlefield and destroying. Whenever there was a good pocket of resistance, he would just smash it. Skarbrand's doing the exact same thing, chewing them up. And after some time, they realize, we've just lost so many guys, we're not going to be able to get the chain. And so it just becomes a waste of life to even keep trying. So they fall back. They're able to move back to that canyon pass, seal it shut behind them, and the Stormcast accept their first real loss of the Realmgate Wars. They try to offer the Fireslayers their payment by saying, thank you so much for even trying to come with us. Didn't intend for it to be a suicide mission, and the Fireslayers refused to accept their payment because they made an oath. So they are with the Stormcast, at least this section of Stormcast, until that brass chain is recovered. And like I said, this is the first time that we've seen the good guys lose in a significant way. They've always won with heavy losses, but this is the first one where it's just like, no, you're not going to take this. There are things that you cannot do in this narrative, and going toe-to-toe with Skarbrand right now is one of them. So with that little story arc completed, we move over to Shyish, Realm of Death. And this is our first look, if you're talking chronologically when AOS came out, this was the first time that we really saw Shyish at all. If you want to know more about the realm and the forces in there, I did a week of focusing on Shyish, and I will, of course, have links to that in the show notes down below. But to put it simply, Shyish, the Realm of Death, is a place of endings. It's largely grim, very morose, a lot of darkness. Some parts of it have perpetual night. And our story comes to rest on Neferata, one of the Mortarchs, Mortarch of Blood to be specific. And in the story we get to visit her personal city called New Lamia. And in this time of darkness, New Lamia is being besieged by a huge Slaanesh army. This is a combination of mortals and demons. There's a demoness running around, a lot of chaos warriors. And Neferata is standing with her war council trying to figure out how do we repel this. She's seen entire empires fallen before. She's just lasted very long. But her time has come. They know their defenses are not going to hold. And she's absolutely right. Because chaos pours in. Her defense network crumbles. Her soldiers are just not that great. She can't bring back the dead to defend themselves fast enough. And chaos pours into the main thoroughfare of the city. A storm rumbles up ahead, and the black-armored Stormcast Eternals, the Anvils of Heldenhammer, show up and just smash back chaos. Of course, this is with the combined might of Stormcast plus the Death Army that the Mortarch of Blood herself is leading. Seeing that things are not going their way, the Chaos Lord, who's riding one of those like little serpent things of Slaanesh, starts barreling straight for Neferata, goes up a castle wall, slithers up top, and is about to drive his sword straight through her heart, but a Lord Azeros pops in, coming in like a wrecking ball, and slices him straight in half. And here's the thing, Neferata, if you know this character, is always looking for ways to scheme and manipulate the situation, kind of play the political game, and always have power over her subjects. And so she's seeing this, she's thankful, frankly, that the Stormcast arrived, that her city is not lost completely, but is still looking for a way to kind of game the system here. How can I have the advantage when we talk to the Stormcast? Well, that same night, Azeros pops down in front of her, and they start to have a dialogue. He's trying to find a way, how do I find Nagash to request an audience with him? Again, this is the whole reason they're here. Sigmar wants to rebuild the Pantheon. He's got, in Shaman, they're looking for Grugni. Gurian is obviously Alarielle. Now he's in Shyish looking for Nagash. So this dialogue initiates between one of his highest-ranking lieutenants, Neferata. And so he explains, this is who I am, this is why we're here, we need to know where Nagash is. And when Neferata speaks, her eyes kind of glaze over, and it is not her voice that comes out, but Nagash's. And that honestly is where the book ends. It just says he thought of his words carefully, ... And that's where this story ends in Balance of Power. And the ramifications of Nagash are so immense that it really couldn't be contained here, and so it really does its own little spin-off series, and that's books 9 and 10, so you have Mortarch of Night and Lord of Undeath. If you're reading the Black Library Realmgate Wars series, it really does chronicle what the Stormcast were hoping to achieve in Shyish, how it all went terribly wrong, and how Nagash is totally not on Sigmar's side, which is not really a spoiler because if you know anything about the game, he has his own Grand Alliance. And those books cover this event and also the lengthy journey that Stormcast go to try and meet Nagash. And it's full of betrayal and intrigue and incredible cool fights, some really great characters that we know of. But for right now, this is where our story ends in Shyish. And the last little minor plot line that we have here takes us back to Chemon, this realm of metal. And hovering above one of the landscapes is a giant metal sphere. The sphere is called Golgeth. In this story, it goes into a lot of detail about kind of this demon of Tzeentch who got split into 9 pieces, and all of his pieces are one by one coming back together. It's a very lengthy, in-depth thing. I think the whole point is that it's just kind of fun world building, but I'm going to simplify it here. As these pieces of this demon are coming together, he's been corrupting the local populace. Here's the thing about this sphere. I'm going to try and explain it to you. It's very hard to do through audio, and there's not a lot of art about it. Imagine a second moon, okay? And in this moon, there is a continent that people have managed to live on. Well, the people on that continent were pretty safe from the forces of chaos and invading them, but they weren't safe from kind of inward corruption. So when one of the pieces of this demon landed there, just randomly, it began to corrupt the populace from the inside out. And over the centuries, they morphed into their kind of own isolated Tzeentch warband. And in that place, there is a Gaunt summoner who's trying to find a way to control Archaon. We talked before about their relationship. I'm not going to go into it again. It's very complicated. But Archaon controls all the Gaunt summoners. They want to break free and control him. The Stormcast, who are of course on a mission to just cleanse the realms in general, fire into this place and are just wrecking house. Again, this is an isolated warband. They don't have a lot of the war machines and things like that, so the Stormcast are pretty handily fighting them. But what's interesting about this specific story is that Archaon himself drops into the mix. My thinking is that because the Gaunt Summoner, who is his minion, was involved, he was able to kind of hear what's going on a lot more clearly than just kind of the general, there's fighting all over the realms. And so he took a particular notice in what was going on here, drops in and sees the Stormcast Eternals for himself for the first time. And what hero does he meet against the Stormcast other than Vandus Hammerhand? And here's the thing. When Archaon shows up, this fight becomes incredibly one-sided, and I think that's important. It's important for us to see this villain for how strong and instrumental and powerful he is. He effortlessly takes out Vandus. It's not even a sweat. Every single Stormcast warrior in this fight is given a warrior's death. Archaon keeps the city. And here's the thing, like I said, this book went into an immense amount of detail talking about this place, and it didn't really seem to drive a lot of the plot forward. That's why I very much abbreviated what's happening. The reason I think it's important is that, one, it's self-contained, so it's a good little addition to poke on to the end of the book. It introduces Archaon to our narrative. Again, this is the time where his model is being released, and it's important to see why he looks so imposing as a model, because we get to see him looking so powerful and imposing in the stories. It gives us a true perspective on his power and his presence. Like I said, you took out the hero who just, single-handedly won the war in the Brimstone Peninsula. Hero Vandus Hammerhand just wipes him without even a sweat. And another one is that we get to see the good guys lose again. Because so many narratives would be really boring if it was just the good guys win. The good guys win, you talk about how much of a cost it took to take a place, but the good guys always win. Well, there's at least 2 stories here where the good guys just straight up don't win. In fact, everything they do costs them something dearly, and they get nothing for it. So in summary, to kind of put all these threads together, like I said, as the war grows bigger, we're spreading into different territories, and it's getting a little more complicated to follow, so I always want to summarize what's happening in these books towards the end. In the Realm of Life, Alarielle was so defeated that she reverted back to being her soul pod form, ready to be reborn as something else. They wanted to plant her in a specific place to revive her. A big battle and long chase got them there, and they arrived at their destination, but she's not back yet. Everything's kind of in a holding pattern right there. Over in Akshi, the Stormcast were sent to claim the brass chain to catch and bind Skarbrand. They made some Fireslayer allies, so that introduces that faction to the factions of Order, the forces of Order, I should say, but they fail horribly in actually achieving their goal. And Scarbrand is still a rampaging beast that they have nothing really to defend themselves against with. In Shyish, the Stormcast Eternals rescued Neferata from a Slaanesh army. When Neferata went to speak, Nagash spoke through her. And I'll just give you a spoiler, things do not go well for that interaction. And over in Chaiman, Archaon enters the Realmgate Wars personally, wipes out an entire storm host, and shows us that this war is long from over, that the bad guys are not just going to keep taking it, they're going to dish out some hurt as well. And there's one thing that still remains, and that is when the celestant-prime knocked Torglug so hard that his soul separated, and then something shot up to Azir. The final pages of this book show a Knight Venator mid-process of reforging. And what we learn is that the hero that was in Gurran, that was corrupted by Nurgle and became this vile warband leader named Torglug, has a spark of hope and decency still remaining in him that Nurgle could not touch. And so when the celestant-prime knocked the soul out of the body, Sigmar saw that value and took it to Azir. And there, the process of reforging removed Nurgle's corruption, and Torglug was reborn as a Knight Venator, Stormcast Eternals of the Hallowed Knights, given the new name Tornus. And what this shows us is a few very important things, is that primarily Sigmar's campaign is not just military, it's not just taking the realm gates, he's not just fighting for land, it's a war of redemption. He's fighting for the souls of the mortal realms. And this whole thing adds a new paradigm to the war. How many of these horrific warlords have some ounce of humanity, of decency to them that can be redeemed? And what does that look like when that power is turned back on the enemy with that kind of rage, the kind of betrayal that Tornus, I should say, feels towards the forces of Nurgle? We're going to see that in the coming books. It's outrageous. In addition to that, we also now know that the Stormcast Eternal project, I guess you could say, didn't end when the Age of Sigmar began. It wasn't like he was gathering up warriors throughout the Ages of Chaos and then made his army and then boom, he's done making stuff. Now it's all about just, resupplying troops when they get destroyed. He reforges them, puts them back on the battlefield. He's still hiring, so to speak. He's still taking in people to be Stormcasts. So as he goes out and inspires hope, more people with that hope are going to fight back, showing acts of heroism, strength, all these honorable qualities that he can then perceive and take them up to become Stormcast Eternals. So it's this thing where he made heroes to inspire hope so that he can find more heroes. And so this whole thing just kind of cascades, which is a very cool addition to this book. It's something we had no idea was going to be coming. When it first came out, so many people, myself included, were just shocked that it's like, oh, we've never seen a guy switch sides. A nasty, vile champion of Nurgle gets turned into an absolute hero for Sigmar. And this raises a lot of morality questions. In several of the Black Library books, the Hallowed Knights have a very strong distrust of Tornus, but to distrust him is to say that you don't trust the celestant-prime and Sigmar's plan. So it puts them all in a very weird position with their faith, and so I think it's a very cool narrative arc that we're going to explore at some point. I'm going to do a Tornus/Torglug video. But for right now, I think it's a great way to conclude this book. So friends, thank you all so much for watching. We're halfway through the Realmgate Wars books, and I hope that you're enjoying this series just as much as I enjoyed making it. Second edition is at the doorstep, and I cannot wait to dive into that and share my thoughts and experiences on the lore and gameplay with you all. If you're enjoying this series, I really do ask that you share it with a friend who's looking to get into AOS so they can get caught up with the lore pretty quickly. It would mean the world to me. Thank you all so much for watching, and happy wargaming.